can you keep a secret?
Changing hearts and minds.
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 Changing hearts and minds. Changing hearts and minds.
Welcome to Change Your POV podcast. You're listening to Changing Hearts and Minds, a show about reviving the warrior spirit and remembering the past to improve our future. I'm your host, Jeff Adamick. Let's get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I totally screwed or what? You're funny.
I want to discuss all this behavior.
Let me out of here!
Hey guys, welcome to the next episode of Changing Hearts and Minds. This is your host, Jeff. Today we are going to be taking a little step outside of the norm. We are not going to be bringing on some kind of really focused, intelligent historian or bring on some dude selling us some kind of way, newfangled way to improve our lives or talking about the transitioning out of the military and civilian life. We're going to be talking about pretty much our heroes and our role models, and let's think about all the people you know in your life that have contributed to your life, and not just the people that have made your life harder than people that have made your life better or worse, but the people that you've never actually met. The ones that you look to inspire you and make you think of how you want to act and how you inspire. Heroes, role models, leaders, these are words that every person uses to describe someone they look up to and they want to emulate. We all have them, and that statement is without exemption. There is no person in the world that doesn't have somebody that they looked up to or somebody that they've used as a role model. The heroes of today, the American service members, are no different from those of in the historic past. They have their own heroes, their own role models, and examples of leadership that they look up to. Changing Hearts and Minds is going to bring you these examples of leadership and role models from the very men who serve or have served, and each one specifies their historical example of heroism, role model, or leadership. Plainly put, we are going to bring you guys stories of the heroes of our own heroes today. On today's show, we've got Albert LaBella. Albert LaBella was born in Utica, New York, but he grew up in Hollywood, Florida. Not Hollywood, California, but Hollywood, Florida, during what we like to refer to as his formative years. I'm laughing, guys, because we are on Skype, and I am taking a look at Al, and he is flexing in front of me. Al joined the US Navy following high school graduation and served on active duty from 1983, which I think I was 4 or 5 years old, to 1991 as an aircrew radar operator on board a P-3C Orion anti-submarine warfare aircraft based out of Naval Air Station, Jacksonville, Florida. Albert attended and graduated from the University of North Florida following his naval service, and while at the University of North Florida, Al was a member of the Army ROTC program and was commissioned as an Air Defense Artillery Officer in 1994. Al served in the 82nd Airborne Division, 101st Airborne Division, the 7th Defense Artillery Battalion out of Fort Bliss, Texas, 35th Air Defense Brigade in Osan, South Korea, the 18th Airborne Corps as the Air Defense Artillery Representative, and a military science instructor at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Al retired from the Army June of 2016 after 22 years of service, and Al's been married to his wife Sharon for 28 years. They have 2 daughters, Mia and Sophia, and they are both attending colleges, and I'm not going to list off their colleges, so all you creepos out there don't go running around these colleges looking for Al's daughters, all right? Albert, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. Pretty impressive biography there. It sounds like you wrote it.
I didn't write it. What I did was I went on Wikipedia and I just conglomerated a whole bunch of different ones from different guys, threw it together, and I made it sound so convoluted and deep that even you couldn't follow along, so nobody has any idea whether or not anything I said is true or not. Pretty much the same way I do my own biography when I tell people it.
Sounds good. I don't even know who I am right now.
That's a different show. We've got a show on our network that deals with psychological problems, Al. If you need to go talk to that guy, we can get you over there to him. Dwayne could probably help you out figuring out who you are. If you listen to one of my older episodes, me and him have figured out that I'm Batman. So
okay,
that
sounds good.
So Al, why don't you? I know I went into a lot of what's going on in your life and your past in that introduction, but why don't you go ahead and take a moment to introduce and tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell some of my listeners who you are, besides obviously someone that I know. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're all about.
Well, let me first start off that I'm considerably older than Jeff, as he alluded to, based on when I entered military service in 1983. I've known Jeff for about 4.5 years now, and he's never passed up that opportunity to let me know just how old I really am. But as the biography or as the resume stated, I did enter the military in 1983, right out of high school. Never had any ambition to go into college, didn't really want to further my education. As a matter of fact, November, my senior year of high school, brought the Navy recruiter over to the house. I was 17 and wanted my parents to sign the paperwork. They weren't going to do it. They didn't think that I was ready. I wasn't even sure if I was ready. But as the year progressed and I showed absolutely zero sign or any potential for academic furtherment, my dad goes, hey, why don't you have the recruiter come over the house and maybe we'll sign the paperwork so you won't be living with us for the rest of your life. So they signed the paperwork April 6, 1982 and February 83, entered the military. And actually, I've been affiliated with the military up until my retirement last year for a continuous period from 83 all the way up till I retired to 2016, with the exception of 9 hours. That's when I got off active duty. I had to wait till 9 hours from midnight to 9 in the morning till I joined the Navy Reserves. And then ever since, I've been affiliated with the military. So that's really what I consider my background and what's developed me up to this point in my life.
Yeah, and all so that we're keeping everything on the up and up. Yeah, me and Al have known each other for 4 or 5 years. We lived in the same neighborhood in the Fort Bragg area right when I was getting out of the military. And don't let Al fool you. He's been around. He knows what he's talking about. He's a very well respected officer, and obviously was in the Navy. And he has a very specific individual that when I approached Al about asking him, I'll give you a little bit of background, guys. What happened was about 2-3 weeks ago, I was trying to figure out where to go in my next series of episodes for Changing Hearts and Minds. And I found myself constantly utilizing Ulysses S. Grant as an example of combat leadership and, overcoming, self-flaws and everything like that to be able to be successful. And I found that I used him so much, and especially with my kid, that I couldn't have been the only person in the military who had somebody else from the military as someone they looked up to and used as a role model and example. So it dawned on me that it wasn't the normal guy you would expect for someone to have. Ulysses S. Grant, although, was the president of the United States and everything, he was just out there. When you think about people who know Jeff Adamek would think that it would be somebody maybe like, Dick Meadows or somebody like that, but it wasn't. So I sent out all these messages and went to all these people that I knew that I knew could speak intelligently and were somebody I respected, and I asked them what their person was that they fell into that category for them. And the person that Al came back with was somebody that I'm be completely 100% honest, I'd never heard the man's name before in my life. And a little embarrassing for someone who tends to believe that I run around telling everyone that I'm big into military history, and I am. And now I know a lot about the individual that he said, but he brought up this individual that just never heard the name before. At first I thought he was making a joke with the way the guy's name is, but let's go right into it. We're talking about Richard, I-R-A. I don't know how you say his middle name there, Al.
It's Ira.
Ira, yeah. Well, one of those 1940s names. Richard Ira Dick Bong. Now, I'm not going to tell you who Richard Ira Dick Bong is. I'm going to have Albert tell you who Ira Dick Bong is. And Dick Bong, I'm just sorry, as much as the guy's an awesome dude, that is a funny name. So we're just going to call him Richard Bong from this point forward, or at least I am, just so I don't break out into laughter every time I say his name, because the guy at least deserves that. So tell us a little bit about who Richard Bong is, Al.
All right. Hey, Jeff, before that, though, I'm going to actually go off script a little bit, because I know you wanted me to talk about this and some military figure. But I want to start this off, and I really say this with the deepest sincerity to you as a friend and as also as a soldier. I know you're a Green Beret. You probably hate being called a soldier. But I want to let you know that there is one person that I've got to know over the last 4 or 5 years, certainly a veteran, and that's you, that I highly respect, and I brag about you a lot. I brag about you to the people that I come in contact with and say, hey, I got this friend. He's crazy. He's out there. He's got that on-off switch, and I never want to see the off switch. But a guy that I deeply respect for your military service, you're a Silver Star recipient. You've confided into me personally in a number of times that I find that to be the deepest way to show gratitude and respect to another person, particularly a fellow soldier. So I just want to go on the record and let you know that you've had a distinguished Army career. I know that you suffered some severe injuries. You told me the story about when you were in Germany and Sarah wasn't sure if you were going to live. She came to see you, and that means a lot to me. And again, I brag to you. I tell everyone I come in contact with, I know this guy, true warrior, true snake eater, Green Beret, and share a number of your stories. So I want to thank you, and I sincerely mean that. And also a great dad. You're a little rough on the kids, But you know what? That's that tough love. You are from New Jersey. Now, that is a fault. I'm going to throw that out there right now. It ain't New York. It's New Jersey. But we'll go with it because you're a Giants fan. But I certainly respect you and your family. Again, you're a good husband. You're a good parent. And I'm proud to know you.
Well, I appreciate that, Alan. And this was not by design. And my intent, and Al knows this because I told him the same caveat I told everyone else I asked it. You couldn't pick someone that you knew or someone that you were related to, because I knew that if I asked a bunch of soldiers and sailors to give me their example, they were either going to pick somebody they were really good friends with or they were going to pick their fathers. So I caveated everything up front with you couldn't pick a friend or a father, but I should have known better that you were going to crowbar that in there to throw a thanks out there. But I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, that's part of why I do what I do here on the Change Your POV network is there's a lot of people out there that can use hearing the stories that we talk about and our views of how we see things and make their lives a little bit better, because there's a lot of guys out there, especially in today's day and age, that are suffering and struggling through finding their way in the world after they get out of the military. And we have found that these shows have done quite a bit for people. So I thank you specifically for being a good friend and for saying those things, and for being someone that I can call up, respect enough to want to know his opinion on the following subject matter. So now that we're done, we're done greasing each other's creases, we can get back to talking about Richard Bong. So okay, let's get back to it. Tell us a little bit about Richard Bong.
Okay, well, let me talk to you a little bit about Richard, I'm sorry. Again, many people may not know him. He was actually America's top ace in the Second World War. He flew P-38 Lightning in the South Pacific. Particularly for the air war, South Pacific doesn't get a whole lot of visibility. It's all over the air war over Europe, but it's certainly justified and deserved. The thing that I like about Richard Bong, first off, he was a fighter pilot. Although I never had the opportunity to fulfill my dream, I live vicariously through those guys. I always wanted to be one, but that's why I selected him, and particularly being a fighter pilot, given a guy that, hey, once he's in the air, it's him and the enemy. There's really nobody. Yeah, he's got a wingman and other folks, so we understand that. We've all seen Top Gun. But it's really him against the enemy, and with no one to turn to other than he and his aircraft and employing his weapons. But the interesting thing about it, though, is that our personalities, from what I've read, and Jeff, you know me well enough, what you read about him, he's a mild-mannered, pretty much soft-spoken guy from the Midwest. Well, we've known each other, particularly over a lot of beer and whiskey, that I fit none of that category. I am nowhere near anything like that. I'm self-praising, I'm self-boasting, something I'm sure that he was not. But being around the element of you, Trey, and Mark, that kind of comes out in somebody. But, and that's what I like about him, is that he not only flew the aircraft, but as you read part of his biography, is that he was promoted through the ranks up through flight leader, squadron commander, and group commander. But he still went out there every day and flew the missions just like everyone else. He wasn't glorified. He didn't earn ace status on his second mission or third mission like some of the other guys. I mean, he flew through the duration of the war. A kill here and a kill there, eventually till he reached 40. And then he was ordered back to the United States for a war bond drive and was not allowed to go back into combat because really he was too valuable of an American fighter, an American war fighter back at the time. And was subsequently awarded the Medal of Honor. And the interesting thing is that he had such a love for flying. When he came back, he actually enrolled in a test pilot program. And not long after, actually the war was technically still going on August 6th, he was flying one of the newest jets the United States had, and he crashed and he died. Coincidentally, he didn't get to see the end of the war where he was so influential on, because that was also the same day the United States dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, the one of two, and then eventually ended the war shortly thereafter. And he never got to see that. But anyone that's an aviation historian or even just an aviation fan like myself will certainly come to understand what he contributed in the meaning of a true warrior to most.
Well, let's go back real quick, Al, and talk about we hear for those people who listen about aviation history and everything, we hear the word ace get thrown around, and you just mentioned didn't get ace status on his first two flights. Can we go into what is it that gets a pilot of the time period that title to be called an ace pilot?
Okay, an ace, actually that goes back I think to World War I, and it still continues today. An ace is when a pilot gets 5 kills. That puts him ace status. And then 10 kills, double ace, 15 kills, triple ace, and so forth. I don't know what it would be for 40. I'm not that smart. But again, just reaching that criteria of aces, there's very few. I think I looked at it, and I think of World War II, we talked about the air battle, the Luftwaffe, the air-to-air engagements. I think there were only 28 to 30 American aces in Europe, which one would think there'd be a lot more than that. And pretty much it's comparable to the South Pacific, too, and all the Zeros and the Zeeks, you know, and the air-to-air combat, which wasn't called that back then.
Right. I don't think they used the word dogfight back then when they talked about it, did they?
Actually, they did. Actually, I think that does go back to World War I.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing about Richard Bong is he's got 40 kills, but in comparing him to the Japanese or really the German aces where they had hundreds of kills, you know, really can't measure up. But he pulled the trigger when he had to and was very successful at it.
No, I like to always think that the American pilots they weren't in the business of just killing everything that they can get in front of their gun sights. So there was more of a. I found that American pilots being, in my opinion, the gentlemen of the military, the guys who were they very much so follow along with that British officer, you know, being a gentleman is just as important as being a warrior. And therefore, they've got a lot of responsibility up there as pilots, having to. They got a lot of. They're not right there in the face of stuff. You know, one lone drop bomb or one lone fired off round can have far-reaching implications. And so those guys had a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. So having those guys get out there and like you said, have the credit of being considered a gentleman among those kind of people is especially a gentleman among gentlemen, if you will. That's a big title to be earned among the peers that he has on there. Now, going into it a little bit, you know, we were talking about you and I about, you know, grab assing and joking around and all that kind of stuff. You know, Richard Bong wasn't always just some kind of a straight-laced individual. In my research into the individual, I found out that in 1942, stationed around San Francisco, he had been caught buzzing the home of a pilot that he knew that had just been married. He was cited and temporarily grounded for breaking flying rules, along with 3 other P-38 pilots who had looped around the Golden Gate Bridge on the same day.
Yeah.
For looping the Golden Gate Bridge and flying at low level down Market Street in San Francisco and blowing the clothes off an Oakland woman's clothesline, which is an odd thing that they just threw in there. You know, you're following along with it, blowing the clothes off of a woman's and then clotheslines thrown in there, and you realize it's not as cool of a story as you had hoped it was. But Bong was reprimanded by General George Kenney, the commanding officer of the 4th Air Force, who told him, if you didn't want to fly down Market Street, I wouldn't have you in my Air Force. But you're not to do anything more like that, and I mean what I say. And then Kenney later wrote that he needed more people like Richard Bong in the Air Force because of what he was. And it was never really, you know, Bong, all the way up until his death, had denied ever being part of the guys who looped around the Golden Gate Bridge, but took full responsibility for buzzing the other pilot's house. So, you know, what did he do? What didn't he do? One thing is for sure, he was definitely a part of this. And it just shows that he was still a human being and still had he still wanted to go out and have fun and do some crazy things with his buddies, which, you know, to me, those make those guys that people look up to even more of a person looked up to, because it shows that they're actually human beings and they're not just some person that's just so straight-laced that they can't ever go out and do something that's outside the realm of the right and wrong.
Absolutely. You know, I want to go back a little bit also where the general made him do the laundry, go back and formally apologize to that family and redo the laundry and hang it up again because it got dirty when it fell on the ground. But to give you a little bit of historical perspective on the gentleman part, particularly for the fighters, you know, you talk about the British, the Canadians, and the Americans, where they held their pilots, particularly their fighter pilots, to a much higher level. The Germans, I think, were the ones that probably set that standard. And, you know, in World War I, and many people don't know this, that we all know who Baron von Richthofen is, right? The Red Baron.
The Red Baron.
Well, he was shot down over friendly lines. That's our friendly lines, the Americans, the Allies, and died. But realizing who he was at the time, that the Allies actually gave him, although they didn't turn him over to the Germans, they actually gave him a formal burial with all honors, recognizing his abilities and so forth. And I don't know how many kills he had, a lot. They probably didn't track him that closely back then. But anyway, so the interesting part about it is maintaining that gentleman's status carried over to the Second World War, whereby when American air crew, whether they were pilots or waist gunners, tail gunners, if they were enlisted, they were automatically promoted to the NCO status because they knew if they were shot down and captured by the Germans, which many of them were, and they were put in the Luftstalags, which are the flyers prison camps, that they would be treated at a higher level, not only as an NCO, but also as an airman, as a downed airman. So there was that mutual respect on both sides of the lines during the Second World War in Europe. Didn't apply to Japan, but, you know, again, it goes back to that. Another interesting note, though, you know who started the Hells Angels?
I do know it was Air Force pilots or Air Force crew from World War II.
Yeah, they wanted to get that down out there in Hollister, California. So I guess, you know, they probably started as hell-raising fun guys, and, well, we all know what it developed into. Not that I would connect it to them. But, yeah, they're certainly a wild bunch.
Yeah, it was interesting how separate pilots and the fighter pilots of World War II can be considered almost like a different class of soldier than most other soldiers. And it's strictly because I think at the time you had a new technology that really hadn't, aircraft and flight was still in its infancy, as far as in the grand scheme of the historical aspect of aviation. And so you had a lot of these guys that maybe they wouldn't have been, officers in the United States military if not for having these abilities to fly. I think that Richard Bong probably does fall into that. He began to learn to fly before he ever joined the military, taking civilian flying lessons, and then was finally commissioned as a second lieutenant and awarded his pilot wings in January of 42. And believe it or not, because this goes to what I'm talking about it being a new technology. His first job as a pilot in the military was as an aerial gunnery instructor. So, I mean, here's a man who gets his flight wings and is really good at flying, but he goes straight into being an instructor, with no kind of, operational experience, because there really wasn't much operational experience at the time. And I'd like you to expound a little bit about your thoughts on what kind of a person what kind of leadership traits do you have to be able to come out of a training program, just get your wings. It'd be like saying to somebody nowadays, here you are now, you're right out of jump school, and now you're a jump master. That to me, that's kind of the same, it falls into the same thing. So, what kind of things do you see in somebody like Richard Bong that makes him that person for you as a leader yourself, as that person for you that is someone that you look up to and somebody that you would try to emulate in your day-to-day behavior?
Well, again, as I said in the beginning of this, I've lived vicariously through those guys. Not being an aviator, always wanted to be one. But I think I can make a pretty fair guess at it, because it's just like anything else, any type of a leadership ability, capability. Not all of us are born with it. Some of it's developed through our years as we build confidence in our own abilities. I think that therefore that now transcends into leadership capabilities and accepting greater tasks and responsibilities as well. But I would imagine, though, just like any time, is that while he was going through flight training, not only did he show good airman skills, that's probably pretty obvious, but he also was able to show a degree of maturity and a degree of responsibility that his combat-tested, combat-proven instructor saw in him, a unique trait, and therefore had the faith and confidence in him not only to fly the P-38, a technologically advanced aircraft at the time, but also to train other student flyers coming up, not only to fly, but able to show that degree of maturity, although limited experience, but with that limited experience was willing to show his own initiative to gain the knowledge and gain that experience on his own outside of just flying, and therefore was able to share that and obviously successfully train the future airmen that conducted the war in the South Pacific as well as Europe. So again, being recognized for leadership abilities up front, it's early. We know it. We see it every day. We see it in the military. I am sure when you went through the Q course or when you went through selection, you probably looked around and said, you know what? This is hard for everybody. But you know what? That guy there, he stands out for whatever reason. Sometimes it's indescribable, but it's just a trait that someone has.
Yeah, I definitely would agree that there are some people that are just born leaders. Although I do believe that leadership as a way of life or as a discipline is something that has to be constantly be added onto. You're never quite finished learning how to be a leader. And I say that because after 18 years in the military, or even, for in your example, 22 years in the military, I got out and learned very quickly that the crisis or the combat version of leadership that I had been taught and that I've been able to get by with for years in the military was not going to work in the civilian world. People don't want to just have orders barked at them no matter how competent you are. People want to be able to be listened to. They want to understand why they do things. And a good leader should be able to identify the people that need to be explained to rather than the people that'll just do because they're told to, and be able to adjust their leadership style to that individual to elicit a certain activity or response or a learning curve out of that individual. And I think a lot of guys who get out of the military who think they know everything about leadership end up being flawed in that respect, because when they don't think they have anywhere to go with what they can learn, then they've stopped learning and they're no longer going to be able to grow as a leader, even if they are a good leader to begin with.
I agree. And again, it's always a developmental process. And I don't care if whatever rank someone is, enlisted officer, it doesn't matter, because we're all placed in leadership positions throughout our career. And one of the things that I think is the most valuable attribute that someone can take as a leader is to learn from the previous mistakes. Never forget them and apply those or think about them again before making decisions down the road. You know, there's times that I can reflect on when I was platoon leader, that I look back on when I was a major saying, damn, I can't believe I did that. You know, it's but I never forgot that. I learned a lot of lessons. I learned that when I was a battery commander. And as I progressed through the ranks, I said, you know what, particularly when it came to dealing with soldiers, you know, we're all going to make mistakes, whether it's the tactical employment of something or training evolution or something. That happens. That's why we do those things. But, you know, making the mistakes with people, particularly on a somewhat personal basis, I don't think there's any way to ever repair that. Anyone could go back and say that they're sorry, I didn't mean it. And the person may say, yeah, okay, don't worry about it, forget about it. But they're not going to forget about it. And I think that's important for a leader to understand, that they're not going to forget about it, and neither should they. And always keep that not in the back of their mind, but always in the forefront, and to kind of think through things before acting. Now, that sounds great coming from me. I'm not saying that I'm very good at practicing that, but I think that's great advice for someone else. But as I got older, and I know that you'll remind me how old I am. By the way, I'm 53. That
you don't look a day over 82, man. Don't worry about it. Oh, man, hey, I feel better right now. I'm ready to take a nap at 6:30. But and I think that not apply just in the military, but also in the civilian world. But I think it's most applicable in the military, because we're given a rank, and if we don't execute the rank that let me rephrase, we earn a rank. We're not given anything. And you know, the rank that we earn and the responsibilities that come with that should be taken seriously, on and off duty, and at every opportunity. Oh, it's good. It's a good point. Thank you, Al, for saying that. It's and I completely agree with you that we spend too much time nowadays wondering about what we're owed, you know, what's coming our way, instead of going out there and earning it. And that's definitely one of those things that, you know, leadership a lot of times is thrust upon people who aren't looking for it. But definitely having a rank or owning a some kind of a title that comes with leadership is definitely something that's earned, and it's not given out easily. Richard Bong, here's another thing I thought was really interesting about him while we were going back, as we just come back off our little tangent on leadership.
Oh yeah, my bad.
No, it's not your bad. That's good. That's the intent of this whole series with this stuff is we're trying to show, you know, our leadership abilities as leaders, and how these guys have influenced us into that kind of stuff. But here's something I found really interesting, and it's actually kind of a funny anecdote also. So April 12, 1944, Richard Bong surpassed the former ace of ace for the United States military, Eddie Rickenbacker's U.S. record of 26 kills in World War I, I believe it was, that he had those. Mm-hmm. So yeah, World War I, Eddie Rickenbacker kills 26, shoots down 26 enemy aircraft, and he's the ace of aces. April 12, 1944, he surpasses him with surpassed him with his kills. He is awarded by his squadron a case of Coke. You're like, mm-hmm. Wow, a case of Coke, that's great. But here's where it becomes interesting. He was awarded a case of Coke because he was not legally old enough to drink. And when you think about what this man was able to accomplish before he was even legally old enough to drink, just brings into the forefront the impressive career this guy had, and the leading from the front that he was able to do. That's just, to me, I find that astounding, that to become even in a job market that is new like aviation at the time, but to be able to get that kind of a title and take that notoriety as the American's #1, ace pilot before you're even old enough to drink is pretty impressive.
No doubt.
So let's go real quick before we move on, because I think Al's got some good stories I want you guys to hear too about having cans of Coke waved at him.
Yeah.
But some of the awards and decorations that Richard Bong had gotten over his short but illustrious career. He was awarded the United States Army Air Force Pilot's Badge. Obviously, he was a pilot. In order from top to bottom, the Medal of Honor. I do believe there were more Medal of Honors handed out back then, but I do not believe that they were any less important than a Medal of Honor that's handed out today. I think you really had to, step up and earn that Medal of Honor, and I do believe he has earned it. His citation for the Medal of Honor reads as such: for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action above and beyond the call of duty in the Southwest Pacific area from October 10th to November 15th, 1944, through assigned to duty as a gunnery instructor and neither required nor expected to perform combat duty, Major Bong voluntarily and at his own urgent request engaged in repeated combat missions, including unusually hazardous sorties over Balikpapan, Borneo, and in the light area of the Philippines. His aggressiveness and daring resulted in the shooting down of 8 enemy airplanes during this period. So in a 25-day period, when he was not intended to be actually on duty flying, he forces his way up into the air when he's just there as an instructor, shoots down 8 enemy airplanes during probably the most high op-tempo time period of the war. So, well-earned citation by him. And you're definitely going to, anytime somebody brings up someone that's got a Medal of Honor, I'm gonna read that citation out because those guys deserve to have that remembered. Some of the other awards that he's got up there is he's got a Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, Distinguished Flying Cross with 1 silver and 1 bronze oak leaf cluster, Air Medal with 2 silver and 2 bronze oak leaf clusters, another Air Medal with 1 bronze oak leaf cluster. And why there was 2 on there, guys, is because you can only have so many clusters on your awards. They ran out of all the clusters they could put on one, so they just threw another one on the guy. I mean, this is the kind of guy he was. He had a Presidential Unit Citation with 1 bronze Oak Leaf Cluster, an Air Defense Service Medal, an American Campaign Medal, an Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 1 3/16-inch Silver Star, World War II Victory Medal, Philippine Liberation Medal with 3/16-inch Bronze Star, Philippine Independence Medal, Philippine Presidential Unit Citation, and I'm pretty sure someone gave him a free cup of coffee at some point just to round it all off. I mean, that's quite a list of stuff to do. Again, we talked about it earlier. Bong then became a test pilot. He did serve and fly with the man who first broke the speed of sound, which was who?
Chuck Yeager.
Chuck Yeager. That's right. I actually throw that out there to make sure I test, make sure Al's still awake over there and paying attention. That and the fact that I forgot his name.
Yeah, and the aircraft that he flew was Glamorous Glennis, named after his wife. I know that's a whole different tangent and story. But anyway, so you tested me. Let me show you a little bit of background.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
During the test pilot, he was assigned to Lockheed, the company Lockheed. He was in Burbank, California. He was assigned to the plant there where he flew the P-80 Shooting Star jet fighters at the Lockheed Air Terminal. And on August 6, 1945, the plane's primary fuel pump malfunctioned during takeoff on the acceptance slice of the P-80 Alpha 44-85048. Bong either forgot to switch the auxiliary fuel pump or for whatever reason was unable to do so. And the reason why they say that is because apparently this aircraft had numerous crashes attributed to this exact same thing from pilots who had never had to go on and switch on their fuel pumps on their own like this before. And so it was something that occurred multiple times with a lot of, even Chuck Yeager in a later interview said that he had it himself, a malfunction in the aircraft for the same exact reason. And because they don't know, only the pilots can speculate as to what happened. And because they had all had that similar type thing happen with them, they believe that was what happened. So what happened was he had this malfunction. He had to clear away from the aircraft, but he was too low for his parachute to deploy. The plane crashed into a narrow field over in Satsuma Avenue in North Hollywood. His death was front-page newspaper across the country, but it was sharing space with the first news of the bombing of Hiroshima. We know now that he was not able to clear away from the aircraft with enough altitude to get his parachute deployed, and that's what died. But it's funny because if you look back and you look at any of the old news reports, it says in the news reports that he blew up inside the aircraft. So I don't know if they were talking about Hiroshima blowing up, and this, it was a misprint. But I think that he was not, he wasn't given the amount of notoriety that I think he deserved, and I think it was only because he fell second, below the fold, if you will, to the Hiroshima, which, for good reason, was, the #1 news story of the day. Just the fact that he was able to make it at all onto the news, when all that was going on, is impressive enough. But definitely a loss, a great loss to the American, to the American military, and somebody that definitely probably would have went on to, in my opinion, being as young as he still was even then. I think you would have seen someone who, like Chuck Yeager, probably would have been an early part of things like NASA, and those kind of things. Maybe not getting out into space like some of those guys, but definitely. Maybe Chuck Yeager wouldn't be the guy that first broke the sound barrier if Richard Bong had not died in 1945.
No, by the way, Chuck Yeager was an ace too. He was a double ace. Since we're talking aces and all that.
So Al, what I like to do, and that's I know I talked to you about it earlier today, and you sent some stuff, and you did send the one picture, which will be put on the show notes. There's a photograph of what I think is the aircraft that you flew in when you were in the Navy. Is that correct?
That is, I flew in the back. That's correct. I was a radar operator on one of those. Yes.
So during the Cold War, flying in that aircraft as an impressive enough as a radar guy looking for submarines and Soviet subs. You have any cool stories, maybe that you can depart upon us that isn't going to get some guy with a clearance knocking on your door asking why you're talking about quackers or something like that. Do you have any cool? Do you have any cool stories you can depart to us?
Yeah, well, I got to have some stories. I have to keep in context of who I'm talking with. I'm talking first off with a highly decorated Green Beret, and you just gave the whole military career of Richard Bong. So at this point, I don't really know if anything I have to say is cool. But there's one thing that I got that I am quite sure that Richard Bong doesn't have in my record, and that's a field grade Article 15. I challenge him on that one. I'm sure you won't find that anywhere on Wikipedia.
I would say that probably when he flew around the Golden Gate Bridge and got in trouble, that would probably be the equivalent to the field grade Article 15, Al.
You know what? As a matter of fact, I never shared that with you guys, as we sat many times sitting around drinking and shooting off fireworks and blowing up the neighborhood. I never shared that with you guys, and I'm not even drinking.
Yeah.
But, the other stories that I got, and, I started off one of them, and I had to change it because, my real Navy stories have nothing to do with doing Navy things, nothing to do with flying in the back of a big airplane. It has to do with what we call Liberty Time. But anyway, that's probably a different show. And
let's keep it. How about the story about the one time you were locked on? They got you. You felt like you had been locked on by another. By surface to air.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty cool story. It was in the mid-'80s we were deployed, yes, Navy. Never spent a day on a ship because the type of aircraft that I flew on was too big. So we deployed to land-based sites, and one of those was Sigonella, Sicily. I think it was 86, 87. And the Mediterranean Sea had a lot of Soviet submarines. It also had a lot of Soviet, we call them surface warships. Keep it simple, all different classes. And so there we'd fly missions. We'd look for submarines, and just south of Sigonella, Sicily, about 300 miles off the coast of Tunisia, was a thing called the Gulf of Hammamet. Now, that's just it's a gulf. It's not an inlet, but it's part of the Mediterranean Ocean. And about 12 miles off the coast of Tunisia, Soviet ships would moor there. They would drop anchor. They were not allowed to pull into ports because the story had it that if they did, and if the Soviet sailors had an opportunity to go on liberty, that they'd run away and never come back again. So they were pretty protective. Don't know how true that is. But anyway, so we would fly down. We would culminate one of our missions. We would do a rigging mission, which is a low-level flight, daytime, maybe 150 to 200 feet, which we recently, which kind of goes, we see all these things on TV, all about the Russian fighter buzzing the American ships or the American aircraft buzzing Russians. That ain't anything new. That's been going on forever.
Right.
But anyway, so we're flying, and one of my jobs, in addition to operating the radar, was also what we call electronic support measures. It's a listening system for other radars, whether they're land-based aircraft or surface ships. And I'd be able to pick them up. The system would process it. I could actually hear it. And it does sound like in the movies. And by there, I would classify what type. Is it from a surface ship? Is it a combatant? Is it a trawler? Is it a big just ocean liner? Anyway, so as we would fly amongst these ships, I don't know how many were there, maybe 10, 15 of them. We'd go down low, we'd fly in between them, we would pick up the standard early warning radars. But this one approach we made was rather unique and something I had never heard before, and I don't know anyone else that had. As we came closer, I started hearing a fire control part of a radar come online. And it does have that just like you hear in Top Gun. It does sound like that in real life.
Really?
Now, were they going to shoot at us? No. But the cool thing about it was, as we got closer, it got louder, it got more intense. And at that point, I was able to call up to the pilot and say, hey, break right at this point, because they've got us locked on. We didn't know what they were going to do back then. And pilot made a sharp right turn, and then we got out of there. But the unique thing, and again, this ain't a great, I don't even think this is a good story. But the unique thing about it was I was able to, or the system was able to record all that data from the radar, was able to actually put it in a Navy database, which wasn't there before, was able to use it for training purposes for I don't know how many years to come. So, again, not a good story, pretty anticlimactic. Yep. Now, but when we landed and we started drinking, now that's when the dancing girls came in. Now that's when the stories really kicked off. And yes, we think that they were of age, at least drinking of age by U.S. standards. But again, we're in Europe, so it may be a little younger. But, one in Rome, which was just north of us, we took of it. There's this one girl. Oh, you want to cut me off now?
Wow, I don't know if I want to cut you off, but you are aware that your wife and daughter do listen to the show every once in a while.
Okay, well, let me tell you this one other story about Italy then. Okay, and again, it started off as a flying mission. Okay, we had to fly from Sigonella, Sicily to Naples. Our plane, we dropped off our commander. He had a meeting up there, so we had a couple hours on the ground. But the rumor always had it was whenever in Naples, Italy, there's a place called the Gut. And as one could probably put it together, where most of the prostitutes hung out, but there was a wall there. They said, have to walk by the wall and see Humpty Dumpty. And we said, well, who the hell is Humpty Dumpty? Well, the rumor had it was an old Italian lady, nasty, snarled tooth, everything you would imagine. Actually had sex, rumor had sex with Hitler and Mussolini. So, I mean, if you want to put something in history books, unfortunately, I was only there in the daytime and I didn't get to see her. But I did see the picture. I did see where she sat. Someone pointed out to me, not a tour guide, but another Navy guy from there. But, I didn't take a picture of her seat, but, that's, so there are a lot of stories like that. Oh, back to the other dancing girls. Okay, now we're back in Sicily.
Jesus. And
they were in our room, and, we had to change the carpet. They couldn't hold their bladder very well when they were drinking. But again, who really cared? We were in Europe. Oh, I'm sorry. What else you got for me?
No. I'm going to say that I think you said it all, brother. I mean, okay. The only thing that makes this all so much better is that you're wearing that ridiculous New England Patriots hat. And guys, I'm going to put out there that Albert here is one of these guys who really does take number 12 and place him onto one of those. He's like a deity to Albert. He's one of those.
Okay, that's TB. First off, that's TB12. Okay. Oh yeah, he's you could call him a disciple. I told you when we watched the Super Bowl. Tom Brady's audibles. That's the 10 Commandments. His playbook is the Bible. Ha! I can't do that religious church choir music, but if I could, I would be doing it right now. Since we're talking about the anointed one.
the anointed one. Well, no, I really can't argue it anymore. Not after that last Super Bowl, I really can't.
Yeah.
Here's my story for the day is so I'm watching that Super Bowl and I see that they're losing by what 4 touchdowns.
28-3, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like midway through the third quarter. So I honest to God was like, all right, this is the end of this crap, and I went to bed. So here's what you got to understand. I get up the next morning, and we had a late show at work over at Cisco because it was the Super Bowl Sunday, and so I get up late, and and there's a note left for me by Sarah, and I say Sarah to Al guys because Sarah, Al does know Sarah. He's been friends with the family, but there's a note from Sarah on there that says, "Send me a message the second you realize how much of an asshole you are." And I'm like, what is she talking about? And, and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't drink much last night, so I know I didn't show my ass. I remember going to bed specifically. So unless I got up and had, one of our illustrious Jeff Adamic moments, later on, I don't understand the implication. So then I turn the radio on. I'm driving to work, and they're talking about how they can't believe what happened and everything. And then I'm agreeing with them. I'm like, I can't believe that Brady let them, get that much ahead of him. And then I start to realize that they're not talking about Brady letting them get 3 touchdowns ahead. They're talking about how with, less than a half left, he beat him. And that's when I realized that I'm an asshole, because I went to bed for maybe the greatest Super Bowl ending in the history of Super Bowl.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And being a Giants fan and watching the Giants beat Brady twice in the Super Bowl, that to me used to be the greatest ending to the Super Bowls, watching Eli, get away from that one tackle. But, I have to admit, I am an asshole. For as much of a football fan as I am, I slept through the last quarter of probably the greatest Super Bowl game ever played, and maybe the one that does anoint Tom Brady as the anointed one. Who knows? I know for sure. I know for sure that I can't argue that he's not at least in the top 3 of quarterbacks of all time, up there with maybe Joe Montana and all those guys. So,
sure. Hey, before we sign off, can I just tell one more story?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm loving every minute of this, so I know that the listeners are going to love it.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, now, again, Jim for a while now, and I want to tell you how close we are. A couple years ago, leading up to that, I used to have New Year's Eve parties at my house, and, we drink a lot, and I had rules. If a guy doesn't drink, I've always respected that. But if a guy's going to come to my house New Year's Eve and drink wine, I'm going to say, man, get the fuck out. Can I swear on this?
Yes, you can swear.
Okay. I said, get the fuck out. You ain't allowed. So we would drink quite a bit. There was actually a crew. We'd all get together and start drinking. Anyway, so at midnight, we'd all jump in the pool, and shoot off fireworks. Well, there was one of them, might have been the last one. Jeff shows up. He's all fucked up. He's drooling on himself at this point. And it's getting close to midnight, and he asks my permission. He goes, hey, I got this thing that may make a lot of noise. Do you mind if I set it off in your backyard? Now I'm all fucked up, too, and I'm drooling. Yeah, sure, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Sure, go right ahead. So we're about 10 seconds out. 10. Do you remember this night?
I think
10,
so.
9, 8, and it's counting down. Well, Jeff's on the side of my house. He pulls the pin to a device. The spoon falls off, and it goes off. Now, what was that? A double concussion grenade that you guys would breach homes with?
I think it was.
I'm sorry.
I think it was a three banger.
Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. Man, that set off the whole freaking neighborhood. It scared everybody. This happened about 4 years ago, and my dog still has epilepsy from it. And so, again, to show you. But anyway, the next morning comes up. I'm all hungover. I'm picking up beer bottles and beer cans off my backyard. Again, it's wintertime, and my brother-in-law's with me. And he goes, hey, what's this? I go, hey, that's the canister that thing was on. Hey, there's the pin. Hey, I believe it comes with a spoon. I can't remember.
It does.
But anyway, so I picked it up with gloves on because I don't want my damn fingerprints on that freaking thing. My brother-in-law and I go back to Jeff's house, and Jeff, here, take your toys back. Because when ATF comes knocking at the door, it ain't coming over here. Did I just incriminate you?
No, not at all. Everyone knows what kind of trouble I cause. And the story is only cool now because both me and Al are both retired, and there's no one coming after us for setting off, armaments in his backyard. But yeah, I remember the looks on everyone except Trey, Mark, and your face. I mean, you guys were just like, yeah, of course he did that.
Oh yeah.
But everyone else's face, that was great. It really brought out. I woke up the dead, I think.
Yeah. Oh, matter of fact, that hole was so deep, I had to bury the stray cats that you killed in it the next day. So. Okay, I made that part up.
We didn't bury them; they're still laying there.
Exactly, just the bones.
Well, Al, I mean, I want to thank you for coming on, man. I really had a good time having you on, and thank you for coming out of your busy schedule to come on and shoot the shit, man, and just have a good, nice talk about what's important to you, and obviously that hat, so.
Hooah! All right, hey brother, hey, thanks for having me on there and making me part of this program. It does mean a lot to me, and you and your family mean a lot to Sharon and I and my family as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and right back at you. We love you guys, and we always enjoy spending time with you guys and talking to you. And for those of you other guys out there listening in, thanks for checking in with Changing Hearts and Minds. Remember, guys, that your life is within your hands. Nobody can tell you what you can or cannot do. Your limits and the things that you do in your life are limited and only handled by you, by yourself. So don't ever let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. Challenge accepted out there, guys. Get out there and do some great things. Dio Presso Liber, and we will see you next time.
Change your POV, and all of its shows can help and heal and even educate. We want you to help us help others. Visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/changeyourpov. Become a patron of our network and our mission.